Hello, class. Welcome once again to another thrilling episode of Professor Moptop. As always, thank you a million, trillion, billion times over. I appreciate all that you do. Thank you so much. In appreciation, this week you're going to be getting 4 hunks of audio from some really early Beatle recordings. These are 4 tracks from the second album with the Beatles in the UK. The first track is a really big deal. It's called All My Lovin', and it was written in late spring of 1963 by Paul, and it's got all of Paul's early traits. There's a lot of optimistic love. There's a bright side. There's a hopeful future, even though we have to say goodbye. It was recorded, or at least started, on July 30th of 1963. They recorded 6 songs for the With the Beatles album on that day. In 1963, the Beatles were working remarkably fast and remarkably well. They were also starting to get more efficient in the studio. They knew that if they came into the studio and were prepared and knew what songs they were going to be doing and they had a good plan, they would be able to successfully achieve their goals, as they did. All My Loving has a goodbye kiss and a hopeful reunion, which is, again, an extremely common Paul McCartney trait. John and George do some fantastic work singing background vocals on this. One of the things that the Beatles would often do is never try to do the same type of thing twice. So even in background vocals, they would mix it up, as it were. And of course, they do it on All My Lovin', which was a really big song, as I said, because it was the first one that they did on The Ed Sullivan Show in February of 1964. And as good as the song was, they didn't think it was quite good enough to be a single. That's how many good songs they had floating around in 1963 and 1964. Another one they had was a George Harrison original. It's actually his first original published and recorded by the Beatles. It's called Don't Bother Me, and it has a cynical look of love, which is a trait that George Harrison would carry throughout the rest of his career. He wrote it in August of 63 while he was sick in bed, and he didn't feel good, and he didn't want anyone to bother him, so he wrote Don't Bother Me. He turned it into a love song, which was pretty much all they knew how to write at that time. They recorded it real quickly. They started it on September 11th of 1963, recorded it, rehearsed it, and worked through it throughout the day, but they didn't quite finish it. They tried it again the day after, September 12th, and they finished it then. They added a bunch of overdubs on it, including the clavs, which are the 2 wooden sticks that they banged together. There's a tambourine, there's some bongos on it, and there's a loose-skinned African drum. It gives it a really cool and unique sound. Even at a very early stage, the Beatles were looking for cool and unique new sounds. George double tracks his voice on this, and he's singing about the old girl to the new girl, which is just kind of a new, clever way of doing it. A very good, promising start for George Harrison and his first original composition. The next one is called Little Child, and it's what Paul McCartney called a work song. It's what bands call album filler, which isn't anything special, at least in their eyes, but they still need to be a certain grade. That's unsophisticated, but it's still a lot of fun. It's called Little Child. They were going to give it away to another artist. They were perhaps going to have Ringo record it, but ultimately John and Paul decided to share the lead vocals on it. There's a bit you'll hear Professor Moptop talking about that they got from the song Whistle My Love from a Robin Hood movie, and the term sad and lonely was taken from Act Naturally. We may or may not have talked about that before when Ringo covered that song. And the 4th song you're going to hear about is a big favorite of a lot of people, and it's Till There Was You, which was from The Music Man, which was a musical that came out in 1957. Meredith Willson was the name of the woman who wrote the song, and the Beatles enjoyed having multitudes. They enjoyed being different types of bands, and one of these bands would be the sensitive Sweet Man, and these guys would sing songs that would be slow dance songs, and they hadn't written too many of these types of songs yet, so they had to cover them, and one of the first ones that they covered was Till There Was You, which Paul heard about it in 1961. He heard the Peggy Lee version, and he immediately said, well, hey, I could record this, and I could sing this, and I could play this. And they played it a lot. They played it at the Star Club, and there's a bunch of Cavern Club recordings of it. There is a BBC performance of it, and they performed it for the Queen when they got to perform for her. It's one of those songs that just gives the Beatles a little bit more credibility beyond being just a rock band. The ballady type songs, as Paul calls them. There's acoustic guitars on it. George plays a magnificent solo. There are bongo drums on it, too. They always knew what to use, when to use things, when to not overuse things, and when to get it just right. And they did time and time and time again. And with that, I'm going to say so long for another week here at Beetle U. Don't forget to check your email. You'll be getting these 4 hunks of audio. And have I thanked you yet? I believe I have. Thank you a million times over. I'm Professor Moptop in 7 or so.